All right. Hey, everyone. So this is Dr. Lauren, and we are going to be doing our very first Friday coffee chat. I can't promise they'll happen every Friday. But we had an idea at the clinic because us doctors were talking about just like, what are your answer when a patient asks this? What's your response to this? And we found obviously we're all congruent and saying the same things, but we get asked a lot of the same questions every day. And so we thought, what if we did a series on answering some of these questions? So on Friday mornings, both our Rice Lake and our Cumberland clinics are open from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. And God bless Dr. Jess and Dr. Katie for working those shifts because I've been at this for 9 years, and so that I let the new ones do it. Well, they're not really that new. They've been around for a couple of years now. But anyways, I'm the boss, so I don't get to. I have to send my kids off to school, and I'm usually drinking coffee and in a robe and working on Friday mornings instead of treating people. So today's question that we are going to talk about is, I don't know, it's probably the most classic question. Every PT, chiropractor, we've answered it over and over. We could answer it while we're sleeping. And it is, do I ice or do I heat? And it's really funny because even my husband will ask me, we've been married for, next year it'll be 10 years. And I'm just like, look at him like, how do you not know the answer to this already? Because I'm not a very patient person. Okay, so in order to really understand when you should ice or heat, we need to understand the mechanism behind what each one does. And we're not going to get too complicated here. So heat's purpose, when you apply heat to the body, it draws fluid into an area. And when we talk about fluid, we're really talking about blood and lymph fluid. Like lymph fluid is our immune system fluid, is a good way to think about it. So blood has two really important characteristics in it: oxygen and nutrients, both of which are necessary for tissues to heal. So when we're looking at when we're looking at heat, a good time to use heat is going to be a chronic issue, an issue that needs to heal, but it is not swollen. So kind of the rule of thumb is that you don't heat for the first 48 hours after an injury. So then let's talk about why. Okay, so ice's purpose is to squeeze fluid out of an area. And that's a very medical term, squeezing fluid out of an area. So when you think about, let's say you roll your ankle, the first couple of days, what happens is it swells up, right? It gets like bigger and puffier. And that's because the body is the body is so smart, innate intelligence is always working. And what the body's trying to do is it's trying to stabilize an injured area. So the only way it has to stabilize naturally, because it can't do its own splint. So it's doing its own splinting by bringing in fluid to those muscles to make them puffier and more rigid. So the body will naturally bring in a lot of fluid to an area that is injured, and that's why you have a puffy thing. So now, although that's a nice initial reaction of the body to stabilize, we do have devices that stabilize a little better and actually don't get in the way of healing, because after the initial injury, that fluid is just stabilizing. It's not helping the area heal faster. So we want to get that out. So rule of thumb is icing the first 48 hours. If something is swollen, puffy, ice to squeeze that fluid out is good. And then after the 48 hours, then it's not as clear of then do I heat after 48 hours? Not necessarily. There is this limbo where it's what feels best? And you kind of have to experiment with it, because it may not be overly puffy still, but you may find that ice makes it get really tight and achy. Or heat might feel really good while you're doing it, but then a couple hours later it feels very, very sore, and that's because your body wasn't ready. So one of the things that we say is what feels better? If you're not sure, I would say 95% of the time when a patient asks in clinic, do I ice or heat? My answer is both. So my favorite thing for people to do, it's a little time consuming, is to do both, and it's ice, heat, ice. Okay? So if you think about it this way, So you start with ice. So you're gonna do that for 5 to 10 minutes. And that ice is gonna squeeze out any of the fluid. The body's already absorbed the oxygen and nutrients from it. And now that fluid is just hanging out. There's no purpose to it. So the ice for the first part is gonna squeeze that out. Then you're gonna heat right away afterwards. And that heat is gonna bring in fresh blood, fresh nutrients, fresh oxygen for those tissues to heal. Then, the tissues exchange it, it gets it, but that fluid still hangs out, so you don't want to keep it there because that's going to delay healing. So then you end the sandwich with more ice, okay? And get, once the body's gotten all that blood, oxygen, nutrients out, end with ice, and it's going to get the unwanted fluid back out. So we say 10, 20, 10. Ice, heat, ice. If you don't have time for that, 5, 10, 5. But I will say one of the last things we want you to do is to sleep with either one. People will be like, oh, I fall asleep with a hot pack. No, we don't want you doing that. Or like I fell asleep with an ice pack on. That's not usually as bad because ice will come to room temperature eventually. But we really don't want you using ice or heat for longer than 20 minutes. During an acute injury, I would say like ice for 15 to 20 minutes, then take it off for 40 to an hour, then ice again. We would rather have you doing that because what it's doing is it's allowing the body to do that physiological pump. And that's what everything comes down to with ice and heat. Bringing fresh stuff in, then getting rid of it. Bringing fresh stuff in, getting rid of it. So obviously this is, kind of covering a broad topic. So if you still have a specific question of like, well, what about this? What do I do for my ankle that's been hurting for 20 years? That's not normal. You should get that checked out. No heat is going to fix that. Get that checked out, people. Reach out with any questions, but we hope you enjoyed your first coffee talk.